And during the past 3 decades, my research has focused on assessing the impacts of air pollution on natural ecosystems, including freshwaters. I've studied freshwaters in the Canadian Arctic, in Western British Columbia, in the Athabasca oil sands region, and in South Central Ontario, focusing on issues such as freshwater acidification, eutrophication or nutrient enrichment, and the fate of mercury, trace metals, and emerging contaminants, including microplastics in these systems. Today, I will briefly reflect on 5 broad points with respect to the federal management of pollution. I intend to expand on these points in a brief that will be submitted within the coming weeks. First point, pollutants can travel. Through this committee, you have heard evidence of freshwater pollution downstream of wastewater treatment plants or other point sources of pollution, which, for example, are some of the causes of pollution in the Great Lakes. But you've also heard that many pollutants can travel long distances in the atmosphere before being washed out by rain and deposited into fresh waters. It is well established that pollutants can travel across provincial boundaries and impact freshwaters in background regions that are remote from population centres. Therefore, freshwater pollution is a national scale issue that requires management at the national scale. Point 2, pollution is transboundary. Many pollutants undergo long-range transboundary transport in the atmosphere, crossing national boundaries. In other words, some pollutants can travel through the atmosphere from one country to another. For example, Canada is a recipient of pollution from its nearby and distant neighbours, and similarly, Canada contributes to the pollution burden of other countries. Therefore, the management of pollutants, and many pollutants, can only be addressed through international agreements. There are many examples of the success of international agreements, such as the recovery of freshwaters from acidification under the Canada-US Air Quality Agreement, or the current work of the United Nations Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution. Canada should continue to be an active participant in the international management of pollution. Point 3. Freshwater pollution will be influenced by climatic change. We currently lack an understanding on how sources of pollution, their transport and their fate in freshwaters will be impacted by climatic change. However, the current prediction is that climatic change will exacerbate freshwater pollution across Canada. Point 4. Monitoring is essential. Monitoring of freshwaters is essential to our understanding of the sources of pollution, their impacts, and to evaluate the success of mitigation strategies. This point is obvious. However, we should reflect on the type of monitoring programs that are required. I suggest that coordinated national-scale monitoring is required for effective detection and management of pollution. Such monitoring programs must be long-term to allow for detection of trends, and coordinated to allow comparison across regions. For example, to date, observations of microplastics in freshwaters have been carried out by individual researchers, each using different sampling and analytical protocols. As a result, we have no capacity to compare across studies and limited understanding of the scale of the issue. Fifth and last point, research is essential. If we are to effectively tackle freshwater pollution, we need to understand the pollutant sources and their fate in the environment. Resources must be dedicated accordingly through provincial and federal funding programs to build capacity in research, and through grants and contribution agreements to build partnerships between governments and research institutions. It is well established that research has played a central role in our understanding of freshwater pollution. For example, research conducted at the Experimental Lakes area in Northern Ontario has contributed to environmental policy around the world, from mitigating algal blooms to reducing how mercury gets into our waterways, and more recently to advancing our understanding of the fate of microplastics in freshwaters. In closing, I urge the committee to reflect on these 5 points with respect to the federal management of freshwater pollution. Pollutants can travel and pollution is transboundary. It is a national and international scale issue that requires management at the national and international scale. Monitoring and research are essential to our understanding of the sources, fate and management of pollution. Change of government should not result in the dismantling of monitoring capacity, research support or legislation to protect the quality of fresh waters.
Thank you, Professor. We'll have to stop there, but there'll be much time for questions. We'll go now to Mr. McNair by video conference.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Randall McNair, and I'm speaking to you from Vancouver, the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. My home is in Fernie, British Columbia's Rocky Mountains, Kukanamakas, the unceded territory of the Ktunaxa people. I know you've heard statistics, results of Auditor General reports, and the like. Levels of selenium are rising in the Elk Valley, and fish are dying. But what does this really mean, though? What's it like to live with this environmental catastrophe every day of your life? I spent 15 years on Fernie City Council as mayor and a councillor. It's a beautiful mountain town in the heart of the Rockies. Our city motto is "In the mountains, by the river." And the mountains and river define us and affect the people of our valley profoundly. During my time on council, our aging water system regularly had boil water advisories, so we needed a second source to provide safe drinking water during these periods. We spent several years determining a source and working with the federal and provincial governments to fund the many millions needed for a safe, reliable water source. We determined the best way forward, and because the specter of selenium was already flowing through our valley, we asked about future contamination of this new well. We were assured by both Teck and our geotechnical consultants that all would be fine. I suspect you can see where this is going. After spending millions of dollars on a new water source and system, this spring, selenium levels in the new well began to exceed levels for the safety of human health. This well has had to be taken offline, and Fernie is again experiencing boil water advisories. This impacts the elderly and medically compromised and creates great stress for many in our community. When you walk into the grocery store, along with the notices of school concerts and swim meets, is the boil water notice from the city. These notices are a regular reminder of the failure of the provincial and federal governments and Teck to keep our river and our drinking water safe. Unfortunately, what's happening in Fernie is not an isolated case. Sparwood, our sister community 30 kilometers upriver, had to have one of their drinking waters replaced by Teck several years ago due to selenium contamination. I have friends who have drinking water delivered to their home as their well is contaminated, and no doubt others will follow. In our beautiful valley, one of our signature summer draws is fly fishing. It's a key part of our summer economy and brings people from all over North America to fish West Slope cutthroat trout. Many of my friends who work in the industry and rely on the river to provide for their families are increasingly concerned about the ever-rising levels of contamination. Concerns regarding selenium have been part of our lives in the Elk Valley since the 1990s. For over 25 years, the provincial government, the federal government, and Teck have assured us that all will be well, and they are dealing with it. We regularly hear how much money Teck is spending, yet levels continue to rise. Statistics and assurances mean little when you can't drink the water. As you may be aware, we are at a crossroads in the Elk Valley. Teck is selling its coal properties to Glencore, a Swiss mining giant. Again, we have assurances. Yet with a long history of failures in the Elk Valley, our skepticism runs high. Our valley needs to heal, yet Glencore promises government expansion of the mines. The Ktunaxa Nation, ourselves, and others have been calling for an International Joint Commission reference on the issue of selenium and other contamination in the waters of the Elk Valley. The provincial and federal governments have failed us. We need this broad oversight. We need the health of our river back. We have a right to safe drinking water. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McNair. We'll go now to Mr. McCann for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, et les membres du comité pour l'invitation.
Thank you for the invitation.
Critical relationship. Water, food security, and national security are inextricably linked. Agriculture, the driver of food security, is limited by water quality and quantity. While Canadians often consider water to be an abundant natural resource around the world, pressures including increasing demand and climate change are turning water into a scarce resource and reinforcing how precarious agriculture's relationship with water can be. That increasingly precarious relationship is part of the reason why CAPI launched an initiative on agri-food water earlier this year. This work was funded in part by the RBC Tech for Nature Fund and was led by our distinguished fellow Nicolas Mesley. Before I dive into our recommendations, I'd like to provide some context. First, Canadian agriculture compares pretty well to other major food producers when it comes to water. Canadian beef has a water footprint smaller than the world average and is 70% of the footprint of Brazilian beef. Canadian beef also reduced its water intensity by 20% between 1981 and 2011. When it comes to wheat, we have a smaller footprint than the global average, with the lowest footprint measured in a 2010 study. Food processing made up 7% of all manufacturing water intake in Canada, and improvements in efficiency actually helped lead to a falling water use between 2013 and 2017. Increasingly, players in agriculture and food value chains are setting and working towards water use efficiency targets. But these figures do not capture how volatile agriculture's relationship with water has become. Struggling to cope with too much or not enough water is something that unites farmers from coast to coast. Our recently released report included a series of recommendations built around the creation of a national agri-food water action plan. We did not call for a strategy. It seems like we are drowning in strategies these days. What we need is action. The action plan must bring together different levels of government with farmers, Indigenous communities, civil society, and the ag value chain to proactively plan for and deliver the two outcomes we need. One that conserves this vital resource and one that leverages it to boost sustainable food production. Federal, provincial, territorial agriculture ministers should take ownership of agri-food water. Our report recommends that they commit to develop the action plan by convening an expert panel, releasing a State of Agri-Food Water report, and then releasing the full action plan in July 2025. Our report also recommends immediate action while the action plan is being developed. Immediate actions include developing a coordinated model for standardized data collecting and reporting, going further to use watersheds as the basis for research innovation and knowledge mobilization, investing in a mission-driven research call to respond to the grand challenge of conserving and leveraging water as a strategic asset. Finally, I'd like to touch on the role of the Canada Water Agency, which came up throughout the outreach that we undertook for the report. There were ongoing questions about what the role the agency would play and how agriculture and food would fit into its mandate. There is significant potential for the Water Agency to facilitate and convene progress on this important issue. A common refrain was that the agency should be a convener and an enabler and not a regulator. Given the needs and the potential of agriculture, the industry should embrace agriculture, but as a partner. Water is critical for agriculture. Too much or too little has the potential to cause significant harm to food production, but managed and leveraged strategically, it can give Canada a significant competitive advantage in an increasingly hot, thirsty, hungry world. I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCann. We'll go to the first round, starting with Mr. Mazier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the panel for coming out here today. It was an important subject. Mr. McCann, I'll start with you. You were kind of singing to the choir here when you were talking about how government needs to basically coordinate and how there's an underlying issue across Canada and in different agencies. They're all fragmented in when it comes to water control, or I guess water authorities. We have a multitude of different agencies, and I guess this is one of the reasons why we're trying to clarify this in the study. But and I do remember the days of DFO and where they came over the landscape, and it was a very top-down type of approach. So as we go down this field of wanting to do better in Canada, is there any kind of things that we can point out, or any kind of rules we should be adhering to make sure that we don't get outside that and develop that kind of agency again, especially when it comes to we're talking about this water agency?
I think it really speaks to the need to understand and respect mandates and jurisdictions and the role that all of the players play. I think that there is a need and opportunity for strong federal leadership, but it needs to be federal leadership that takes a collaborative approach with its provincial partners, its municipal partners, and the farmers that are often on the land and on the front lines of this debate. And so we see this as not as a need for the federal government to expand its mandate, but the federal government to act as a convener and a facilitator to bring more people together and to develop more common approaches. We struggle in Canada with the provincial responsibility for water monitoring and water quality, where you have different approaches, different definitions, different standards used across the country. Bringing people together to develop a more common set of ways to talk about water research, water information, water availability is a small thing that can have a big difference. I think that there is an important opportunity as well in trying to better align and invest in that research so that we all are talking and have that same common understanding of what we really talk about with water availability, water quantity. And again, I think that that's a real role that the Canada Water Agency can play to support other partners. The federal government can play a supportive role, an enabling role, recognizing a limited mandate that it actually has on this issue.
Left for time. Speak.
Oh, you have 3.5 minutes.
Okay. I guess at this point I'd like to introduce the motion that the committee report to the House that the Federal Court of Canada has overturned the Liberal government's cabinet order banning plastics, declaring that the order is unreasonable and unconstitutional, invalid and unlawful. That the committee urged the Liberal government to act in accordance with Canadian law and no longer introduce legislation and cabinet orders that contravene Canada's laws and Constitution. Mr. Chair, I'm very surprised that this matter has not been raised at the Environment Committee yet, which is why I'm raising it today. The Federal Court of Canada has deemed this Liberal government's plastic ban unreasonable and unconstitutional. Those are the exact words from the court. This is the second time in nearly a month where the courts have ruled that the Liberal government's environmental policies are unconstitutional. Last month, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the Liberals' No More Pipelines bill, Bill C-69, was unconstitutional. And now we know that Minister Thibeau's plastic ban is also unconstitutional. I wish he would just quit hiding from this committee so we could ask him some quick questions on his failed policies, but he keeps hiding from Canadians. It's been over 240 days since this minister has testified at committee. He has been embarrassed by these court rulings, but Canadians deserve answers. I expect the Liberals and the NDP will once again block this motion and will continue on, but Conservatives believe that the government needs to quit introducing legislation that contravenes the laws and Constitution. I hope we can vote quickly on this matter and move forward with our study.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As we've said before, the minister will be appearing before committee at his earliest convenience or availability. We'll also be appealing the decision on the basis of the unconstitutionality of our ban on single-use plastics. But I think in the interest of how much time we might have left, I think we should return to the study at hand.
Proposing a motion to adjourn. Is it adjourn debate on this? No, but are you proposing that we
Yes,
adjourn
I
debate?
propose that we adjourn debate on this motion.
So that's a dilatory motion.
So motion to adjourn debate. Mr. Ali,
Yes.
Madame Chatel, Mr. Longfield,
Yes.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
Yes.
Mr. Vancouverden,
Yes.
Monsieur Datel.
No.
Mr. Cram,
Opposed.
Mr. Leslie. No. Mr. Mazier,
No.
Madame Posé,
Contre.
Mr. Bachrach.
Vous êtes contre qu'on adjourne le débat?
Are you against adjourning the debate? I don't want to talk about this motion. I want us to continue talking about freshwater.
Yes.
Okay.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Thank you. For the record, the minister has gotten back to me with a date, which I can share with you on another occasion. So we'll continue. Mr. Mazier, you've got 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
Thank you, Chair.
Pardon?
No. Thank you, Chair. And Mr. McCann, back to you. I guess one of the more underlying questions as I've looked at water issues over the years, I've always often wondered, like, is there any other agencies or any other countries that are doing this well? Like, what does the United States do? Do they have an overarching sort of coordinating bodies, or Europe, or how do other countries handle water?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question around how you define well. So other governments have been driven by crisis to take different approaches. I think if you look at the struggles around jurisdictions that are seen in the United States, where you have states with their own approaches to water management that don't always work well together, that recently were spurred to work well together when the federal government threatened to intervene and override their state jurisdiction, points to a system that probably doesn't do a very good job conserving, managing, leveraging the water that it has. We watch a lot with interest what happens in Australia. Again, their agriculture sector has been significantly impacted by water use policy. Their water use policy driven by a crisis that existed, or the threat of a crisis.
I have to stop you there because there's a bell ringing. It's a half hour bell, I believe. So I'd like to get unanimous consent to continue for the next 25 minutes. Okay, so sorry, go ahead, Mr.
Actually, Mr. McCann, briefly, how much time do I have left?
You have basically 2 minutes.
Okay, good. Wrap it up, and I got one last question for you, too.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I would say just briefly, I think it's important to understand that around the world that kind of the dynamics with water are changing, and Canada has an opportunity to get ahead of the problem before we're put in the same position as the Australians and the Americans have been put in, for example. And this is something where we can act before the crisis gets here, and it's something that should be driving how we think about water and agriculture.
I think one other issue I guess I want to point out, and I'm sure you're in agreement with this, but I've often observed, like, rain makes grain. If we don't have water in agriculture, we don't have any food. Like, and there's when it rains, rain makes grain, but drought, nobody wins. That's an old farm saying. Actually, you can take that one to the bank. So, and it's so true when you look at how ecosystems break down when we don't have enough water. And when we talk about water, we are talking about food supply in our nation. So this is why we need to get this correct. And agriculture needs to be front and center with the agriculture managers, the producers that are on the landscape that have the ability to actually save Canada and make Canada a nation that is a superpower when it comes to agriculture production. But they have to have the tools. And it doesn't need a top-down type of government approach. It needs a bottom-up type of approach where farmers can actually be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Messier. We'll go to Madame Chatel.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. My question is for Mr. McCann. Hello and welcome. So you're from Bristol in Pontiac. Welcome to our committee. Congratulations on your excellent report, the national plan. I read it with a lot of interest. It's very important to repeat what you said in your conclusion. This is a climate change era and a climate conflict era. There's an increasing amount of geopolitical challenges, and water is the main challenge for the 21st century. For agriculture in Canada, there is the possibility of changing that and shifting things into opportunity. My questions will pertain to your recommendations in the report. First, I have two questions. My first question is with regards to your recommendation to plan with regards to water and agriculture. Can you elaborate on that recommendation? Of course. There are great examples where the watersheds work. There are possibilities to better plan as well. Here's the context. Water is a regional issue. The dynamics pertain to the watersheds. These solutions might not be the same from one watershed to another. There are dynamics with regards to the quantity and quality that may differ. Water management is different from one province to another. There are places where organizations exist and they have certain tools and funds to invest in research, management, and knowledge sharing. But it might be different for a different region in Canada. We feel that we should support these organizations and make sure that the tools are available to help those who live in those areas close to watersheds. We don't always agree with our conservative colleagues with regards to environmental policies, but we do agree that farmers' voices need to be at the forefront in order to plan, for example, to be included in this study, for example. As you say, climate change and water are very important for farmers. I'd like to get back to recommendation 6.2. You talk about a panel of experts. Mr. Mazur asked how we can integrate your recommendation to the Canadian Water Agency. Do you have any recommendations for us to make? Our recommendation is for Agriculture Minister or the Agriculture Department takes charge. We want the department to be at the head of this. Of course, other departments are also important and need to be involved. For example, infrastructure, environment, the list is quite long. For agriculture, for the Agriculture Department, we want this to become a key part of their work. They should be involved in all the elements of the study. We're talking about a report on water that is published every 2 years, which gives a better overview of what is happening on the agri-food side. We want the environmental department to become involved in these agricultural issues. It is a shared responsibility, but leadership needs to be taken. We ourselves need, in the industry, need to demonstrate leadership. We have to have our own solutions to this issue. 5 seconds. I'd just like to say that that recommendation piqued my interest. There is a governance structure planned, provided for, and I wonder if that can be part of it. You don't have time to answer. Maybe you can provide it in a written format. Ms. Posé, thank you to all our witnesses. Here's my question. I'd like Mr. Ahern and Mr. McNair to answer this question, I am going to talk about water rights, which Mr. McNair talked about in his opening remarks. Public authorities sometimes impact the integrity of water ecosystems. I will give you some examples. There was, of course, the toxic waste in tar sands. There was toxic waste dumped into 16 lakes, and there's the PMRA that also wants us to increase the use of pesticides, and that is something that we will end up eating. So governments sometimes are limited in what they can do. So, Mr. Ahern, Mr. McNair, do you think that Canada put in or implemented the right policies to protect the environment or the hydro environment of water?
Thank you for the question. I've missed most of the question because of my earpiece. But I got the end of it, which I think suggested, has Canada put in the right policies or framework? I think Canada's working towards putting in the right policies and framework. There are good structures in place, but I think those structures can be improved. And there can be more common sense or joining the dots between organizations. For example, most of the pollution that I've worked with is atmospheric transport of pollution into receiving systems such as fresh waters. So clearly there needs to be connection or coordination between agencies responsible for monitoring air pollution and those responsible for monitoring fresh waters. I like the suggestion earlier.
On parle d'agence et là, bon...
We're talking about the agency. We know that the government wants to implement the Canada Water Agency, but do you think that such an agency can actually remedy the fact that there isn't enough political will? I gave you some examples earlier. For example, spilling toxic waste into the tar sands, or mining companies that can dump their waste into 16 various lakes, and the PMRA authorizing pesticides. Can the Canada Water Agency remedy all that? Maybe Mr. McNair can answer, and then come back to you afterwards, Mr. Arian.
I don't profess to be an expert on this matter, but my short answer from our experience in the Elk Valley is no. Right now, there's work being done by ECCC on the coal mining effluent regulations, and the intent is to create a two-tiered system by which new mines will be subject to one level of requirement, and the mines in the Elk Valley will basically be grandfathered and get a free pass. The situation that we have in the Elk Valley is one that industry is addressing the symptom, which is the water contamination, not the problem, and that's how mining is conducted. So the failure of the provincial and federal regulatory systems is why the Ktunaxa Nation for more than a decade has been asking for an international joint commission on the watershed in the Elk Valley, and we have really lost faith in the federal and provincial governments as far as maintaining the health of our watersheds and ecosystems. There's been mass die-offs of fish in three of the tributaries.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur McNair, pour votre réponse. Dans le fond, ce que vous...
Thank you. So what you're saying is that everybody's working in silos and there is no coordination between these organizations. So, Mr. Ahern, do you think that the Canada Water Agency would be able to collaborate with various ministers or departments? We know that public authorities right now, and Mr. McNair just gave an example, have a negative impact on the integrity of hydrological systems.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just follow up on the comment from the previous witness and say, to some extent, I agree that we focus on end of pipeline solution. We know the answers are easy. We should really clean up the emission points. So I would suggest an agency should be able to. I mean, there was a suggestion that an agency could convene or facilitate, but I think it could also mandate and put in place stronger responses. So in theory, it should. I mean, it's tough to say. I don't understand why it couldn't.
20 secondes, en fait.
Combien?
How much time do I have left? 20 seconds? Wow. So here's what I understand. The controlling pollution, or the level of control right now, is not adequate. As you said in your report, pollution moves around. Or you said that in your opening remarks. The departments all work in silos and are not collaborating with one another. Therefore, other government levels are unable to do their work because the federal government is not taking charge. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but Mr. Bachrach can also ask certain questions onto you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I was listening to Mr. McNair's presentation, and he briefly mentioned the need for an International Joint Commission reference. And I wonder, Mr. McNair, if you could expand on that. What would the process be for obtaining such a reference? What does the community and your organization see as being the beneficial outcomes of that? And what role can the committee play in ensuring that such a reference takes place?
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Again, as I mentioned, the call for the International Joint Commission reference has been put forward by the Ktunaxa Nation for over 10 years. It's a reference under the Boundary Water Treaty of 1909, and it's a method by which Canada and the United States would share oversight of the watershed. This has been requested because, for instance, the Elk Valley Water Quality Plan, which was implemented in 2014, has not achieved the results that it set out to do, and Teck has not been in compliance with that since the beginning. Never in the almost 10 years that plan's been in place. So it's from the committee's perspective, it's a matter of political will. It's something that's been discussed by the President of the United States and our Prime Minister, and we know that it's shall we say on the radar. But as mentioned earlier, with this pending deal with Glencore, we need that oversight in place where we can stop polluting our neighbors and stop polluting our own backyard.
And the process for obtaining a reference, Mr. McNair, would the Canadian government simply request that one take place? Or is this something that both countries have to request simultaneously?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because it is key. It's my understanding that every reference that's taken place has been a joint submission by Canada and the United States, although it is possible for one or the other countries to move unilaterally on this. It would be our hope that Canada and the United States, as neighbors and partners, would join together and make this reference together. That would, from our perspective, be much stronger. And of course, the province of British Columbia and the transboundary Ktunaxa should be part of that dialogue. As I understand it at this point, it is absolutely up to the political will of the government of the day.
And Mr. McNair, do we know how the Americans feel about this? It would be interesting to hear from them as part of this study. I'm not sure if we'll have anyone relevant to this specific topic coming to testify, but in your conversations with folks across the border, is there a shared desire to see such a reference?
Yeah, from my understanding, from the U.S. Geological Service to the indigenous nations in the United States, right up to the White House. They are desirous of moving forward with Canada on a reference. Senator Chester of Montana recently spoke to this, and there's a recent paper that was released on the contamination in the Elk Kootenai watershed that really underlined the importance of this issue. I can share that with you, Mr. Bachrach.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Perhaps you could submit it to the committee and we could consider it as part of our report. Mr. Chair,
so.
how much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
A minute and a half.
As you know, Mr. McNair, my neighbors are considering a proposal to mine about 800,000 tons a year of coal in the Skeena watershed.
Point of order.
Mr. Longfield?
Yeah, sorry, Taylor. We are getting really close to the vote.
No, we can finish. We can finish. We'll have time to finish and still have 6 minutes till the vote.
Is everybody voting electronically?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Taylor.
Wait, don't worry. I've got it under control. I'll let you know how you voted after it's done. The question, and I assume, Mr. Chair, you'll give me another couple seconds just to finish my question. My question to Mr. McNair is what message he would share with the people of the Bulkley Valley and the Skeena watershed who are looking at this proposal to mine 800,000 tons per year of coal in the Skeena watershed, which is home to an internationally renowned steelhead angling industry and, of course, all 5 species of wild salmon, which are vital to First Nations. What should people take from the experience of the Elk Valley?
Well, I'll put it this way. Coal mining has been happening in the Elk Valley for 125 years. And if I was posed with the question, would we do it again? I would probably say no. We have a legacy that in our valley that provides high quality steelmaking coal around the world. But to start a mine with the issues and the impacts that come with it, with a sunset industry, the reality is the world is moving away from steel made with coal, and the horizon that we kind of give is about 30 years.
Yeah,
so
we'll have to stop
I would say
there.
No.
We'll have to stop there for the vote, but we have time for a shortened second round with this panel. So if the panel wouldn't mind waiting about 15 minutes, we'll come back to you. After the vote. We're all voting virtually, so we don't have to walk over to the House, and that saves time, and I appreciate members agreeing with that.
I see 30-minute bells.
No, but there's 5 minutes left. Okay, thank you. We'll just pause for a moment. We'll resume now, and we're doing a shortened second round, so we're going to reduce the time, everyone's time, on the second round by 25%. So that means my math is good. 4 minutes and 2 minutes. Bonjour, bonjour. Oui, Monsieur Garon, bienvenue.
Hello, Mr. Garon. Welcome to our committee. So we will continue, and it's Mr. Leslie Brandon's turn for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to start with Mr. McCann. I appreciate my colleague's comments across the way when she spoke about the importance of the agricultural sector's voice in environmental policy, specifically in water policy. However, in my experience, that has not been the reality under this government at all. And I noticed, Mr. McCann, that the National Agri-Food Water Action Plan states that the series of papers on the creation of the CWA mentioned supporting agri-food. However, agriculture formed a very small part of these documents. So I'm curious, from your perspective and colleagues in the agricultural sector, is agriculture normally engaged meaningfully in water issues or in any environmental policy issues, the Sustainable Agricultural Strategy, Canadian Water Agency? What is your perspective on the engagement and with the agricultural community, and is it a consultation or is it a meaningful engagement?
I think that that's an interesting question. So I think often, the level of consultation has probably never been higher. We have more opportunities to offer more perspectives in more places. But I think that's different than engagement. And I'll note that I think that the approach with the Sustainable Agriculture Strategy Advisory Committee that the federal government's using is different, where there's more ongoing, more in-depth engagement. I don't think that we necessarily see that on other files the same way. And so I do think it is important to recognize the difference between consultation and engagement. And I think we would all appreciate the opportunities for more meaningful, more in-depth engagement on this issue and many others.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. And I'd highlight that research into productivity is an important part, and it has a very environmental impact, potentially in terms of moisture resistance, drought resistance for crop commodities, for example. However, we've seen a shift away from farmer-led research and decisions being made that are going to benefit the productivity and their ability to have crops that adapt to changing climate and changing water levels available. So I'd just like to combine two questions into one. What role does water management on natural landscapes of farms mean in terms of irrigation water availability, as well as research priorities that farmers need to adapt to the changing water availability that we do have without investments in water retention and irrigation capacity?
So Canadian agriculture, compared to its competitors, is a relatively low user of irrigation. We have a lot of untapped potential for sustainable irrigation on Canadian farms. The government of Saskatchewan is kind of picking something up that was started 60 years ago to build out greater irrigation infrastructure. Canada Infrastructure Bank is a banker of that. So I think that there is potential. It's a good example of finding the balance between conserving the resources that we have and leveraging it for irrigation. And I think that we can do both in Canada. When it comes to R&D, it's really important. We have bred and developed more resilient crop varieties that are able to withstand droughts in ways that they couldn't 20, 25 years ago. That's a really good example of an R&D measure that resilience is and productivity is not necessarily something directly water related, but it is really critical to responding to this changing dynamic of water and climate change. And so we need to do more. We need to invest more. We need to recognize that our models and our knowledge around how water is changing too, and we're not doing enough. We call for emission-driven research. Calling one of the challenges that we often get in agriculture is rather than investing more and investing incrementally, what we do is just add another priority, research priority to the existing budgetary envelope. And so rather than just adding water to the list, we think that we need to actually invest more and dedicate and target that additional investment to water as a priority.
We're done, yeah. Okay. Mr. Ali.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all witnesses for being here today to share your knowledge and expertise on this important subject. My question is to Professor Arian. Could you advise us with respect to whether there is more that our government can do to deal with microplastic pollution in our rivers and lakes? And would a ban on single-use plastics result in a significant reduction in microplastic pollution?
Thanks for the question. Microplastic pollution is an emerging topic. We're still, I think, in a learning phase. As I gave an example that much of the research to date has carried out sampling and analysis using different methods, which we can't really compare, so we really don't have a good understanding of the situation. So I know there's been another committee in terms of microplastics, but I think some understanding of a coordinated sampling approach across jurisdictions so we can have an understanding of the scale of the problem. And of course, there's interest in terms of nanoplastics as well. In terms of pollutants, well, I think to some extent it's quite simple. If we can understand the sources, we can manage those sources and help to reduce the problem. And so if single-use plastics are a source, well, then perhaps we should manage that source. It's also worth recognizing that, of course, what we see in the environment today in terms of microplastics, they are plastics that have degraded from 20 to 50 years ago in terms of their release in the environment, so it's that slow breakdown. So we expect to see an exponential increase in microplastics in the environment, given the fact that there's been an exponential increase in the use of plastics over the past 20 to 50 years. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're seeing in terms of microplastics in the environment. So what we do today may have an impact in 50 years' time.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McCann, you have said that Canada has a fragmented and soiled model for water management, and the government's policies on data collection and reporting is far from complete or standardized. If you had the authority necessary, what step would you implement to improve that situation?
So I think there's an opportunity to bring people together. I think it's not necessarily about authority, but a collaborative approach that better standardizes the data collection and monitoring and reporting that we do across provincial boundaries and alongside the federal government. So I think the two things I would do is standardize. We need to a clear set of definitions, and then we need to invest more so that we have a better understanding of what is the availability, what is the quality of water. It's a really good example of the lack of understanding that we have impacts our ability to be more strategic in how we conserve and leverage water.
We have about 30 seconds left. 30 seconds.
Mr. Arian, if you want to add anything on freshwater pollution, on a different impacts on that, on your expertise.
In 15 seconds, if possible.
I think somebody asked a question earlier, were there good examples elsewhere? I think one example that may be worth looking at is the EU Water Quality Framework Directive, which tries to establish consistent methods for monitoring across multiple jurisdictions, but also looks at top-down and bottom-up solutions to solving pollution.
Perfect. That's a very interesting answer. Madame Posey.
Ms. Posey. Thank you. Mr. McCann, I'd like to ask you a question. you talked a lot about the Canadian Water Agency. On our end, we don't know much with regards to what's happening and what power they have and what their objectives are. You talked about conflicts and preventing droughts, but I'd like you to hear about protecting the resource and protecting water and what the risks are for our health. Would we need more regulation? If the Canadian Water Agency is unable to implement more regulation, how will we counter all of these threats? We need to be aware of the fact that provinces are responsible for protecting the quality of water. In the agricultural sector, it's a good example of the investments that are needed in research. We need to improve our knowledge around various practices that can help us protect water. We need to know what the real impact is on water. I think these days, sometimes there are things that we think we know. And there is always an opportunity to improve our knowledge with regards to the agricultural impact on water. Where the Canadian Water Agency can be a leader and is by bringing the provinces together. The agency can also invest more in infrastructure and sharing knowledge. I'll stop you right there, Mr. McCann. We need a brief statement. My question was, and you said correctly that various provinces have different jurisdictions, but they are limited in what they can do if the federal government doesn't take the lead.
When we talk about mining, much of the regulatory environment is provincial in nature, and yet when we talk about fish, water, pollution, these touch on federal statutes. I wonder if you could speak to the federal government's role to date in the Elk Valley. What role has the federal government played, and how has that related to the overall track record in addressing the issues you've mentioned?
I think it's a case of maybe a hammer that where a scalpel is required, and the federal government has intervened by fining Teck. Several of the largest fines in Canadian history, and environmental fines, the biggest one being $60 million for thousands of infractions over several years. But it really appears that Teck takes this as just a cost of doing business. The amount of $60 million may sound like a lot, but it's a few days of revenue for a corporation of that magnitude. So we need to get away from just this. We need punitive measures, but they need to be more constructive. And I think need to. Again, I'm going to come back to the International Joint Commission. That sort of oversight that is truly takes the importance of the entire watershed into consideration is critical. And another piece that I'd like to touch on is what ends up on the land runs into the water, and so it's really critically important in places like the Elk Valley to ensure the protection of the terrestrial environment as it influences so substantially the aquatic environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mazer. Mr. Mazer? No. Okay, we'll go to Mr. Longfield for 4 minutes, and then we'll come back to Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to build on that last discussion that we were having with Mr. McNair about the terrestrial impacts on clean water. Guelph is on a groundwater supply. We don't take our water from rivers and streams. There is an impact on aquifers, but there's also impact on wildlife and on biodiversity. Could you comment on, as we're studying water, the related externalities that we should also be including in our study? There's a lot of stuff there, I know.
There's a lot of stuff there, and I'll start with the selenium. The selenium is oxidizing from waste rock that comes from the mines, and the well that I referenced in Fernie and Sparwood were both in aquifers. They were not in the rivers. So these systems are, as you know, so interconnected that it's really critical to have to take a big picture look. And for instance, the fine that was the $60 million fine from Teck, the constraints on the spending of that fine are that it really relates to the aquatic environment. Yet in many cases, it might be better to acquire some of the landscape surrounding to reduce logging and to reduce turbidity. So we can't take any of this in isolation, as certainly Mr. McCann would know. As with respect to agriculture, this needs to be looked at holistically and thoroughly. And now.
Great, thank you. And that's exactly where I was going with my next question, was with Mr. McCann, and the planting of trees, riparian zones to try and filter the water before it gets into watersheds. Looking at what else is done in agriculture for root architecture to get roots going deeper into the soil. To also help with carbon sequestration and soil health. Could you comment on the reason that Canada is doing as well as we are in terms of water management sometimes has to do with soil management as much as anything?
Yeah, often the right things to do, the good things to do in agriculture have multiple benefits, right? So planting more trees, riparian buffers are good for water management, also really good for carbon sequestration. I think it's a good example, though, of where Canada's been slower than the rest of the world. So if you look at the farm programming in the United States, they have had for a much longer time a much more significant conservation program that supports agricultural lands. Canada's coming to that game a little bit late. We have had there are existing programs like ALICE that help support farmers that delivers some of those benefits that you're talking about. But governments have been slow to come to the table with investments. And I think it's an opportunity where we can do a lot more than what we're doing today.
So I've asked this question of another witness. I grew up on the prairies, and PFRA was all over the prairies from the 30s, the Dust Bowls of the 30s up until 2014 when the program was canceled. It had to do with irrigation water, tree planting. Is something we could be considering revisiting PFRA in terms of our agriculture partnerships with provinces and territories?
Very brief answer, please, like 10 seconds.
There's a lot of opportunity to do a lot more and to invest in it. I think the delivery model of how you go about it can certainly be debated. I don't know if we need a new PFRA, but more investments and is going to be a good thing.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Major.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. How long do I have? 4 minutes. 4 minutes? Okay. Hi, Mr. McCann. We'll ask some more questions here. So one thing in talking about, of course, the farming community has always been accused of dumping fertilizer into water streams, right? And cows are in the water and all that kind of stuff. But what about the technologies of taking the nutrients out of the water? I've often said, like being in Manitoba, of course, we're the lowest part of the watershed. So everything from, I said the day the Saskatchewan discovers that their nutrients are going down the river, that it'll be the day the water gets shut off. So I noticed back when I was back previously with Keystone Agriculture Producers, there was a model out there. There was actually, they were taking the phosphorus out of sewage treatment plants and then putting it back on the soil, which where I farm, we're very low in phosphorus. So phosphorus would be a key ingredient. So how, when we develop this agency and like working towards solutions and technology, where would that belong in the water discussion, and how would we place it into whatever entity that was going to be developed?
I think you highlight some really interesting issues and dynamics that play out in agriculture, where I think we often think about kind of the one issue, and carbon gets a lot of attention these days, But depending on where you are in the country and how you farm, water may be your number one environmental impact. And we don't do a really good job in Canada prioritizing what issues need to be addressed in what places. But there is a lot of effort and improvement that's already been made. PFRA was mentioned in the last question. There are some really good examples of that. Is less relevant today because the way that we farm is different. The practices that are used, no-till, the combination of no-till and Roundup and GM products have really changed the impact that farming has reduced runoff, has helped reduce the environmental impact, but there are still some challenges in some places, and recognizing that some of those areas need more of a focus around reducing environmental impact is important, but there's a lot of opportunity to do it in a proactive, progressive way rather than trying to regulate or take a kind of that stick approach. I think that there's a lot of interest in doing better and a lot of opportunity for partnership to improve agriculture performance.
Yeah, I've often thought like if somehow we could get the cities that have obviously infrastructure problems when it comes to dumping sewage and all those issues that are around that, but people have, right? If we could somehow start marrying that with agriculture production, I think we'd be a way better off country. So I think that's something that the committee needs to kind of coordinate as we develop new policies for this. How much more time?
About a minute.
I guess PFRA, and I know this is brought up a lot. I know I heard the parliamentary secretary actually bring it up, Terry Duguid, whatever he is, for parliamentary secretary for water, yeah. And he was talking about, well, it's going to be like PFRA. The problem with PFRA was a government type of approach, and it was very outdated, as you commented as well. And I think we can learn from PFRA. There was some good things, but there was also some very limiting things in that. So I guess I'll go back to my first question. If there's one takeaway that we could, when it's coming to dealing with agriculture and food production, what should be actually focused on most importantly when it comes to water and water management?
I think it is that investment in research and development. How do we do a better job understanding how to be more water efficient? How do we do a better job at developing more drought-tolerant crops and more drought-tolerant cropping systems? We talk a lot about mitigation, but adaptation actually I think is the number one issue in agriculture, and that really should be where that focus is. How do we adapt to this new reality?
Thank you very much. And on that note, I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their contributions today to our study. We will take a short break and then go to our second panel, which the break should be, 5 minutes or so?
Ideally.
Yeah, ideally. Okay. Thank you again to the witnesses, and thank you to the members for your questions. We'll be right back.
members of the committee. Welcome to our panelists. I'd like to reassure you that sound tests were successful. Here today, we have Mr. Eddie Charlie, co-organizer of the Victoria Orange Shirt Day. We also have Fertilizer Canada, Director Frank Anneau, Product Stewardship. From the International Association for Great Lakes Research, we have Jérôme Marty, who's the Executive Director. And from the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake, we have Grand Chief Victor Bonspiel, Eugene Nicholas, who is the Director of Environment, who is appearing by video conference, and Tracy P. Cross, who is the retired police chief of Kanesatake. Welcome to all of you. We will begin with Mr. Charlie. You have 5 minutes for opening remarks.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, I'm from the Cowichan Nation, and I left home when I was 14 and moved to Vancouver. And 20 years ago, I came back to the island, and I went to the Cowichan River, and I noticed the water was very, very shallow, only about a foot deep. And every year that I went back, it was getting more shallow and shallow. And so I asked somebody about that. And they told me that there was a mill in Crofton that was diverting the water for their use. And so I went in the community and talked to some of the elders and asked them if they were getting salmon. And they said no. So I asked them a little bit more about the water, why it was so low. And they told me that a lot of it has to do with the mill in Crofton diverting the water, and this was having a drastic effect on the plants, the animals around the river, and I'm really concerned because the salmon run is becoming very low every single year since 2002. And not only are the salmon not returning to the Cowichan River, but the plants are becoming destroyed because the water is not getting there. And when the water does run, it's warm because it's too shallow. And I'm really concerned because my elders used the river as a source of food and medicine. And every year, more and more of the plants are dying. More and more of the animals are not returning, especially the salmon. And my ancestors have thrived along the Cowichan River only because of the salmon. Now, I was talking to somebody about reconciliation, and I just want to point out that reconciliation is not just about human relationships. It's about reconciling with the land, having a relationship with the land. And right now, we are not getting that. My people would like to be able to use some of the plants along the riverside, but that's not possible because the river is absolutely destroyed. I was talking to somebody named his last name is Williams, and he's one of the last few speaking members of my nation that speak Hulkmeetan. And he knows a lot about the medicine in the land. And he told me if we don't do anything now, he says, we're not going to be able to pass anything on to our children. I do not want to be one of the last few people to celebrate life along the Cochin River. I do not want to be the last one to be able to enjoy having salmon for dinner, and I do not want to be the last one to be able to enjoy collecting, harvesting medicine along the riverside. But that may be the case because as it is now, the whole riverside is absolutely destroyed. You can drive a car right up the river for half a mile. I am just asking the government to please help us achieve reconciliation, not with just human to human, but land as well. I do not want to be, to have my own grandchildren not be able to enjoy what my grandparents were able to enjoy along the river. I'm getting very emotional talking about this because the life along the river is absolutely destroyed. The trees are dying, the plants are dying, the salmon are not returning, and it's absolutely terrible.
Thank you, Mr. Charlie, for that very cogent expose on the impact of declining water levels on the way of life of a people. We'll have time for questions. I'm sure there will be many questions. We'll go now to Mr. Anneau from Fertilizer Canada. Mr. Anneau is online, I believe.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, everyone. I'm Frank Anneau, Director of Product Stewardship for Fertilizer Canada. We represent manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers of nitrogen, phosphate, potash, and sulfur fertilizers. Thank you for the invitation to appear and speak today. We believe that voluntary industry-led initiatives that put farms at the center are the best approach to reduce nutrient runoff. To that end, we've been heavily involved with implementing FOR nutrient stewardship across Canada. FOR helps farmers apply the right source of fertilizer at the right rate in the right place at the right time. The resulting efficient use of fertilizer and nutrient use efficiency increases both cost savings and crop yields. Not only that, but applying fertilizer in the right place with the right weather conditions ensures it stays in the field and out of waterways. For example, in Ontario, corn production FOR practices can reduce phosphorus runoff by up to 60%. And in a Saskatchewan cereal oilseed pulse rotation, this reduction can be as high as 75%. These numbers are provided by our FOR Research Network, a group of leading research scientists at universities across Canada who help determine best practices for different growing regions. This knowledge is then shared with farmers by Canadian Crop Advisors, or CCAs, who participate in our FOR programming, which has two tracks, FOR designation and FOR certification. FOR designated CCAs provide recommendations to farmers and create a FOR management plan. Acres under advisement are then reported back to Fertilizer Canada and aggregated across the country. As of 2022, we have 8.5 million acres under FOR designation towards our 5-year goal of 14 million by 2025. FOR certification is built off the same foundation, but verified by third-party auditing and currently run in Ontario. Audits require documented evidence to show CCAs have worked with farms to identify minimum setbacks for surface water, inlets, and wells, and have collected on-farm data showing reasonable expectation of no increased risk to water quality. FOR certification standards were drafted in 2018 by our steering committee as part of a voluntary initiative to improve the Western Lake Erie Basin. One of the key goals is to create long-term positive impacts on water bodies associated with agriculture, including reducing eutrophication and helping meet water quality standards. These efforts support the Canada-Ontario Lake Erie Protection Plan, which features FOR on its approach to reduce water phosphorus levels by 40% below 2008 levels. We're pleased to report that 1.8 million of 9 million total arable acres in Ontario are under FOR certification as of 2022. This exceeds our goal of 1 million acres by 2025. Combined with FOR designation, that's approximately 11 million acres under FOR advisement across Canada towards our 5-year goal of 15 million acres by 2025. We also recently hit 500 CCAs with FOR designation to provide guidance. But we can always improve. Our annual fertilizer use survey shows 56% of growers self-report that they use basic FOR practices. However, 30% are only where they already use FOR principles, and only 7% have FOR plans that are signed by a CCA. The cost of initial implementation also remains one of the top barriers to wider adoption. To overcome this barrier, we do believe that a FOR climate smart protocol should be adopted by Canada's greenhouse gas offset system. This will allow farms to generate and sell credits for forest practices that reduce emissions and have the co-benefits of reducing runoff. In turn, this would generate revenue for farms, reduce implementation costs, and increase demand for forest guidance. The On-Farm Climate Action Fund has already upticked that demand, and a national protocol would push it even higher. In response, we do believe government support could help accelerate forest training for crop advisors to provide the needed guidance. We've already invested $2 million in developing and running forest programming since 2018, and this is on top of the tens of millions invested in identifying and demonstrating best practices in R&D. Our pre-budget submission this year requests an additional $2 million in government funding to aid these efforts. We've also advocated these solutions to the Sustainable Ag Advisory Committee, where I co-chair the Fertilizer Emission Reduction Working Group. I'm pleased to report that the Working Group on Soil Health and Water has also identified advanced nutrient management in their recommendations. We've also engaged AFC on the UN's Global Biodiversity Framework under Target 7 to reduce risk of nutrient runoff. We're very pleased to see FORA featured in their recent What We Heard report on Canada's 2030 Biodiversity Strategy consultation. I look forward to further collaboration. Just to close here, our 2021 consult with the Canadian Water Agency also had three key recommendations to recognize the standard of forest stewardship, to support market-based incentives for growers, and to align with provincial management plans that feature FORA, such as the Manitoba Climate and Green Plan, the Prairie Resilience Plan. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Marty.
Mr. Marty.
Member of Parliament's distinguished guests, committee staff, good afternoon, bonjour à tous. My name is Jérôme Marty, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Associations for Great Lakes Research. I would like to first acknowledge the land where we gather today, the unceded and surrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The Algonquin people are the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed. I welcome the opportunity to share with you the main issues and priorities that the Great Lakes scientists are reporting for the Laurentian Great Lakes. There are three main topics that we would like to bring forward. The first one about nutrients. Although the Great Lakes water quality has improved in several lakes, Lake Erie continues to remain a priority area with regards to nutrients management for both point sources, example, urban areas, and non-point sources, agriculture. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement includes reduction targets for phosphorus loading, 40% reduction from 2008 levels by 2025. Reduction of point source discharges of nutrients have been achieved through improved wastewater treatment technologies, but the reduction of non-point sources nutrients through adaptive management and best practices poses more challenges. The second is about contaminant of emerging concerns, the CECs, or again, the forever chemicals. Pharmaceutical and personal care products, PPCPs, pesticides, and per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, are increasingly detected in the waters of the Great Lakes, including in urban surface waters. Understanding the human and ecological impacts of exposure of persistent CECs is critical for both specific compounds, but also for mixtures. Third, microplastics. They are now widespread through the Great Lakes Basin. They can be detected in water, sediments, and wildlife. Recent research has been conducted to assess the toxicity of microplastics exposure in the Great Lakes, and these risk assessments show that the concentrations measured across the Great Lakes exceeds proposed risk thresholds for water samples. We have produced 5 recommendations as part of a brief. The first one is to consider adding CECs and microplastic to the list of contaminants of concerns in, for example, Annex 3 of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. The second is to invest in research to better understand the fate, behavior, and toxicity of emerging contaminants to support informed regulations. The third recommendation is to consider climate change as an accelerator for pollutant production and toxicity. Higher temperature increased metabolic rates of resident organisms, causing oxygen depletion and creating toxic conditions for the biota. Higher water temperatures also favor the growth of harmful algal blooms, HABs, able to release cyanotoxins such as microcystine. As stated by the editor of our journal, Dr. Robert Hickey, Lake Erie is the canary in the Great Lakes climate mine. In this context, the urgency of reducing nutrient inputs from the land becomes even more critical. Fourth, engage with First Nations and Métis on water monitoring and management. This recommendation is reflected in the 2003 third triennial assessment of progress on water quality, on Great Lakes water quality, released by the IJC earlier this month. 5, and last, adopt a comprehensive approach for Great Lakes science. As mentioned earlier, the Great Lakes are inland seas, and as such, they call for management approaches that are similar to those developed for marine ecosystems. Faced with an aging research infrastructure, Great Lakes science has fallen behind, and it's in its ability to understand the physical, chemical, and biological features of these ecosystems, and also to report on how quickly they are changing. Several organizations are working together to develop a decadal science plan for the Great Lakes. This initiative, led by the IJC, has identified 6 priorities for the Great Lakes, and will next focus on the blueprint for its implementation. I thank you for your time to allow us to share insights on the threats of pollution that pollution poses to the Great Lakes. And please contact IAGLR if you have any questions about science and the Great Lakes or require support for your work. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marty. Grand Chief Bonspiel, please.
Assalamualaikum. I'm here today to. Is this on? Sorry, okay. I'm here today to bring to your attention some issues or an issue in my territory of Gunnesadauga, Mohawk Territory, concerning a GNR site that is owned by 2 community members, and it's on federal lands within our territory. I want to bring to the attention of the committee here and to all the members that are listening and that can bring awareness or some assistance to the issue there that has been happening since 2015, I believe, in our community, and has now become a toxic waste site, which myself and my council at that time have just recently, since 2021, revoked the Band Council resolution and the permits and agreement that we had with the GNR owners. Now we're in discussions with the federal and provincial governments on a remediation process, which has now been halted because of the, I guess, interference by 5 council members on my council regarding the site and regarding 3 requests from the federal government that have not been answered due to the toxic environment in our council. Myself and my witness here, Mr. Tracy P. Cross, and also online, Mr. Eugene Nicholas, who is the environmental director in Gunnesadauga, have been working diligently with our community and with another council chief, Chief Valerie Bonspiel, to help remediate the issue. And there are remediation plans, but they're being stopped. They're being roadblocked by 5 members of my council for reasons I can only say is ridiculous. When it comes to the health and welfare of not just Gunnesadauga and Ronu in my community, it also involves the health and welfare of the surrounding municipalities and their community members also. This is not a political issue anymore, which the federal and provincial governments have, I believe, have been trying to undermine that view of it. But it is now a health issue. And I have joined forces, or forces have joined with my plea from those municipalities with the MMP, I believe it is. We've written a press release. We've written resolutions together to the federal and provincial governments for assistance in this issue. But right now, it has gone on deaf ears, and it seems that we're being ignored. This was read out in the House by Miss Elizabeth May, was brought up, I believe, 2 years ago, and it is still being ignored. And it is being held, I believe, a political hostage by these 5 individuals on my council to stop any progress in the remediation plan that the federal government is offering to our community. And I think it's time that that the governments, that both governments, provincial and federal, realize that this has to stop. People need to start listening. People have to realize that this is not a First Nations issue. It's a community issue, it's a non-native issue, and it's a health issue, and it's an environmental issue. And you're talking now about water issues. There's 3 streams that run through the GNR site that go into the Ottawa River, which turns into the Lake of Two Mountains, which then turns into the St. Lawrence River. And that affects multiple municipalities and communities downriver. Aquatic life, the fauna, our medicines, our natural way of life, fishing. This is affecting many, many qualities of our livelihood and traditional territory. And I'm just here to give a plea as a last, we're almost destitute here to have something done, to have somebody listen to us. And please get something in writing, in agreement. I've even gone so far as to asking the federal government to approve veto power to myself to sign these agreements to get it done, because my community and other communities surrounding it have been wanting this, but it's being held as a hostage for negotiations for these 5 individuals who want their way done rather than community.
Okay, thank you for that opening statement. We'll now go to the first round of questions. Mr. Deltel for
6 minutes.
6, yeah.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello to everyone and to the witnesses.
Mr. Nicholas, Grand Chief, thank you so much for your testimony. But what a testimony. Very hammering us to see how hostage you are right now. La situation que vous vivez est tout à fait.
What you are going through is intolerable, and thank you for your testimony today.
I ask you, how do you explain the fact that the federal government didn't do anything to help you, and this is now we have this situation to address?
Well, the federal government has given us 3 options, 3 requests that need to be done by a full council. It's obvious the full council is not, they don't want to adhere to these requests. That is why I asked for a veto power from the federal government to accept that. Out of respect, but that respect has gone out the window right now. I haven't even gotten a response to my request, and now our community is wondering why this is not happening, and that is the federal government has left it on the table. These 3 requests that need to be done by a full council signage, which is going to be impossible at this point. It's a political vacuum. Thank you, and we're just trying hard with the way and the avenues that I have within my mandate to try and rectify this, to come to a solution for many years now, since I've been mandated in 2021 as the new Grand Chief of Kanesatake, whereas the previous Grand Chief ignored these issues. When I was brought in, I did my mandate. To my platform, I came through with my promises. I removed the Band Council resolution and the agreement from Council, and I was even able to have GNR owners turn over the land to our community, which is one of the agreements that the government wants, the federal government, because they will not fund a privately owned property. So I had those lands reverted back to the Mohawk Council, and that's when these agreements were put forward by the federal government. And now they're left on the table, and my community and myself and Chief Valerie and the members like Mr. Cross here and our Department of Environment are fighting for that and fighting against our own, these individuals who are supposed to be there for the community. My own governance, exactly. And it's just a fight, and we keep running into walls because the federal government and the provincial government are not intervening properly. They're letting us fight amongst each other. They're letting this become and I'll put in brackets, an Indian issue, a First Nations issue. And it's not. This has gone way beyond the scope of just within our territory. Right beside the GNR site, there's the properties of You have farmers who have been affected economically with their crops, with their dairy, with their agriculture, and it's affected their income, and it's affected their livelihood. And I thought for sure if we got these municipalities on our side, that the federal and provincial governments would listen. But obviously, they don't seem to care about either side.
Grand Chief Busbill, thank you so much.
Monsieur Nicolas a sa main, je sais pas si...
Mr. Nicholas has his hand raised. I just want to conclude.
This is a problem of courage and dignity. We deeply appreciate. Monsieur le Président, je partagerai le montant maintenant avec Monsieur.
I will share my time with Mr. Garon. Nicholas did raise his hand. I don't know if he had any questions. It's up to you to decide. Well, I will ask a question to Mr. Nicholas next time. Thank you to Mr. Detel, and hello to the Grand Chiefs. I don't know if I said my hello correctly, but welcome to the committee. The federal government has said on numerous occasions that this is a First Nations issue and refused to act. They said that the contaminated soil was under somebody else's jurisdiction, of the two Gabriel brothers whose land it was. Can you give us some specifications? Those letters were given back to the council, to the band council, and there is no capacity now, no ability now to, or possibility to decontaminate those soils.
Yes, that's correct. That the owners of the GNR site did revert the lands back, and it had to go through our lands department. But for some reason that I can't explain, the lands department decided to share that information with my cohorts on council, the 5 chiefs that are against this, and now one of those chiefs refused to share that and move it forward unless the federal government puts forward in writing a guarantee that those lands, that if they're reverted back to the MCK, will not, they won't leave us holding a contaminated site in the end. But we all know right now we're holding that site. The site is there in Gunnesadauga. It's not going anywhere. It's still in the hands, unfortunately, of, well, it's in the gray area now because now that chief is holding the land transfer.
Grand Chief, we're going to have to go now to, because the 6 minutes are up, but we'll go, there'll be, ample time after, but we'll have to go now to Mr. Van Koeverden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sego, Nyawagoa, for being here. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your courage. This takes a lot of bravery to come here and be as forthcoming as you've been. So I appreciate that, and on behalf of the side of the committee, we do thank you for your leadership. The water of Gunnesadauga is important for a lot of reasons, not just drinking and irrigation, but I know there's a big paddling community in Gunnesadauga as well. And as somebody who got to use a kayak for 20 years, as a white guy from Oakville, I want to say Nyawagoa for the sport that I enjoyed and brought me around the world for a long time. So there's also some pretty awesome Mohawk paddlers that I looked up to over the years. So thanks for that. You see Alwyn Morris one day, let him know I say hi. So can I ask, how's the drinking water situation in your community?
The drinking water in Gunnesadauga, the health center, the Gunnesadauga Health Center usually takes care of that, and they take water samples every other month, I believe. It could be more, but usually the drinking water comes back satisfactory. That's the main response that every community member receives. Yet they have the opportunity to go further than that, to do a more deeper analysis of our drinking water, but I don't think too many members want to do that, even though it's only a short matter of time to do that. It takes, I believe, 2 weeks to get that extra analysis done, which I did, and yet they showed in my own drinking water at my house, it showed a higher percentage of magnesium, I believe it was, which is, they said it's normal to have that in drinking water, which is coming from a well, and all of Gunnesadauga, because we do not have an aqueduct system, we're all on wells. So that we're worried about, because as I said, the site in the GNR, we have 3 creeks running through there, which run into the Lake of Two Mountains. And some of our memberships, as Mr. Cross here, he lives less than a kilometer away from that site. But you have to know, as mentioned here, and one of the gentlemen was speaking earlier about water and the contaminants, how it sits on the top of the soil and it seeps into the earth and goes into the water tables and then into our water, drinking waters. Well, that's exactly what's going on in Gunnesadauga. I mean, we don't even have the funding to do complete analyses or tests or assessments to do that. So we don't know how deep this has gone, but we do know that it is contaminated through other assessments that we've had through Health Canada, through TC and Harris Company. Right now, those assessments could go even further if my council, who just last night was voted out and voted on confidence, if they would allow and stop holding this land transfer hostage. And then the federal government would move forward with a process, the right process, full funding to have that land assessed properly and remediated.
Thanks, Grand Chief. Can I ask a couple questions about the MCK, the Mohawk Council of Gunnesadauga? You've kind of alluded to a little bit of dysfunction and some challenges there. Do you have quorum right now?
Well, yes, there is quorum amongst those 5 individuals. But we are a custom band. Our electoral code is a custom electoral code, and we practiced our custom last night in a community meeting and voted those 5 members out. But they've since taken myself and Chief Valerie Bonspill to court, Superior Court, and 12 of my community members for standing up for their hereditary right and custom. And they're using our community funds, where myself, even as Grand Chief, have to spend my own monies, and our communities are spending their own money to fight these individuals, while they have an endless fund and putting us and taking our band support to fight this issue and against our community for this.
Okay, now moving over to your communications with ISC, with Indigenous Services Canada. Have you been in touch with Minister Hajdu? Have you had a conversation with her office?
I have not. I sent multiple emails to her and to, I believe it was one of her attachés, Natasha Barron McNabb, to ask for conversations with her, but I haven't gotten any response, except, and the last response was when I asked for veto power, and that was, it didn't go anywhere.
Thanks, Grand Chief. Can I offer if you've been offered mediation through Indigenous Services Canada?
We have been, but we've had mediation before within the council, and during that mediation, the Sûreté du Québec had to be called in because it was going to get physical. So they had to intervene in 3 of our meetings. So intervention, mediation is out the window. That is why I had requested for third-party management, because these individuals have control and signing authority for our funding, and they're just wasting our community funds on lawyers, which in fact were terminated by our community in May. And also we have a criminal investigation that's ongoing, a fraud investigation with the Sûreté du Québec for a breach of trust also with the funds during the tenure of Sarah Simon.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. On va passer maintenant à Madame Posé. Monsieur Garon.
We will now move on to Mr. Garon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, Grand Chief, Mr. Cross, Mr. Nicholas, thank you for being here and for answering my invitation. The first issue I started working on when I was elected in 2021 was this one. We talked to the Environment Department. We spoke to Minister Guilbeault and with his cabinet. They told me at some point that Mr. Guilbeault could no longer take care of this, and then they told us to refer to Mr. Miller, but then eventually we didn't know who to refer to, and I'm a pretty smart guy, and I didn't know who to refer to. and eventually I was told that maybe it would be easier for you, the Mohawk Council, to have to be connected to or in communication with the federal government. Have you also had this kind of difficulty when it comes to urgent matters, relaying with the federal government?
Yes, we've had those type of, I guess, roadblocks that we run into. But it just seems to me that the federal and provincial governments are passing the buck. Neither one of them wants to take grasp or take the reins of this issue fully, even though the federal government has offered suggestions and, I guess, floating agreements until these 5 individuals on council agreed to it. Now, I don't understand why the federal government would listen to 5 individuals who are holding a potential rehabilitation plan for our community and the surrounding municipalities. Why would they allow this to happen? More and more people are going to get sick, and more investigations are going to happen, and it's going to prove that it's because these sites or this site was neglected.
Là-dessus, Grand Chef, j'aimerais vous...
I'd like to hear what you have to say, Grand Chief. There are occupation letters that had to be given back to the council so that we can act environmentally. Those letters were returned, and actually they were stolen by certain council members, which is why we can't decontaminate the site now. Now you want to have a right to veto to be able to take those decisions, but the federal government wants the unanimity of the council. Is that not giving a veto right to those who don't want decontamination?
Yeah, it's just doing the exact opposite in my request. Myself as the Grand Chief, I only gave this veto request to the federal government out of respect from my office as I was trying to do some due diligence here, but I did not have to do that. I can go directly to my community and ask for veto power. And I do not want, and the request wasn't for veto power in all issues or to finish my mandate with veto power. It was veto power on that one issue concerning the health and welfare of my community and the surrounding municipalities. That's the only one, and it was stated in that request. Now, with my request not being granted, yes, I do believe that they're given the veto power and the control to these individuals who are abusing the word quorum to their advantage.
Et si vous me permettez, Grand Chef.
If you'll allow me, Grand Chief, the federal government has already done some decontamination studies. Can you tell me if the federal government has made any offers, if any work has been done that would allow us to follow up on the first steps for decontamination tomorrow morning if the political situation arose? Has anything like that been proposed? Is there any work that has been blocked?
Yes, that is one of the 3 agreements proposed by the federal government to have. I believe the site assessed by their own people, by federal agents, I guess, or federal entities that would do that. But that is one of the reasons why these 5 individuals on my council are refusing that. They want to have control of the funding that will be coming in. But why would a federal government give the funding to our governance who is under a fraud investigation?
On parle de montant, de quelle ampleur, de quel ordre?
How much money are we talking about here?
I believe it's 100 million plus.
Et de là l'importance qu'il y ait une gouvernance saine.
And that's why it's important for there to be a healthy governance framework so that they can act in the interest of the community and for decontamination.
The only way to move forward is through collectiveness. And we don't have that. What we have right now is our 5 individuals who have gone on the, I guess, protective mode, aggressive mode, to the rogue mode. They are gone very rogue. Aside, they're not even listening to our community members who have the last say in everything, in every decision, and they're just not complying with any issues that are raised by our members or even by the federal government and provincial governments.
Très rapidement, Grand Chef, vous avez parlé de l'importance de la communauté.
You talked about how important this is for the community and that it is an environmental issue for the entire region. Have you spoken to other neighboring municipalities, for example, Oka, Mirabel? Mine is certainly in there. Do you have the support of any government officials for decontamination?
Yes, I've been to many meetings with Mayor Pascal Cavillon of Oka and also with the surrounding municipality mayors who have all been in agreement. We have BCRs or resolutions from those municipalities at the MRC, all in agreement to work forward together for a resolution to rectify this issue and to push the federal and provincial governments to act on this.
Thank you. Mr. Bachrach.
And the health and welfare of us.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voulais pas interrompre le témoignage.
Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt the testimony. I still want to mention that this is a study on freshwater. I understand that Mr. Garon and Mr. Grand Chief, you do have some issues currently that are very specific. There are two First Nations communities in my riding, and we work with the federal government to fix those issues as opposed to going through a committee. But I'm happy to help you through this committee. Just a moment.
Alors, Madame.
Ms. Châtel, have you finished your point of order? Mr. Garon, do you have a point of order? Yes, it is in response to Ms. Châtel's point of order, and it is indeed a point of order. The Grand Chief is telling us the circumstances that make it impossible to decontaminate soil that is polluting the entire Lower Laurentians area. It's not an issue for me. It's just that it's Mr. Bachrach's turn. It's important to reiterate why this questioning is relevant. Mr. Deltel, same point of order. I am completely overwhelmed by the Pontiac MP's statement saying that this is not relevant. This is not just a question of pollution, it is a question of access to water. There is a population that is taken in hostage, and they might have health issues. This is totally in our purview.
Points of order during my round of questioning.
No, but we haven't started your round of questioning. So
no, I know, but it comes off the end of the meeting, which is
yeah,
also
I
my
know.
round
Let's
of
just.
questioning.
I would implore members to.
I can use points of order to ask questions and make comments too.
Points of order are kind of moot, but so go ahead, Mr. Back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I can bring this to the point that Ms. Châtel was trying to get to, which is the aspect of this that relates specifically to water. And Grand Chief, I appreciate that your concern is really for the contamination. It's regarding the contamination of the water supply, the impact not only on your community members, but neighboring community members. And I wonder if either yourself or Mr. Nicholas, the Director of Environment, could describe in more detail what the nature of the contamination is.
Answer.
Yes, I wouldn't have a problem answering that. Right now, we're currently launched in the third phase of a contamination study, which does not touch anything outside of the standard contamination standard of Canada. But we're looking to alter standards. However, we have conducted other studies in the community with Environment Quebec in such areas that were found that they had a lot of hydrocarbons and cancerous carcinogens, chemicals that found inside the soil. Now, this is impacting not only the water, but the wildlife, the plant life, and is impacting everything, all surrounding areas. And we have a very big species at risk area in which we are, identifying and managing right now. And not only does it impact inside the forest, but it's impacting the health of our community, which is, not far from the site. And you can smell it in the morning. You can almost like taste it in the air when you're going through there. I've been on the site several times, and it's unbearable. We've had some people from ISC, from the Quebec Regional Office, come down, and they couldn't even stand it themselves. And this site is just sitting there, and it's fermenting, and it's rotting, and we're not sure how far this has gone down now underneath the surface because we have very important water aquifers that feed our water supply, not only through artesian wells, but also spill into the Ottawa River. So my concerns are water is life. Our policies have to reflect that of life and make your policies more stronger in a sense where if things that are giving you life, such as animals, water, and plants, you should also put a heavier, substantial penalty to those who contaminate and those who don't follow environmental policies. Because what we're dealing with here, gentlemen, is life and life surrounding. And, you know, we got to take care of that. We have to manage that. And to me, there's no other priority than that. And on top of that, to add that, our community since 1960 has been used as a dumping ground, not only for the Columbium site, the mine site that's close by, but other construction projects such as the 720, the Champlain Bridge, in which the Mayor Plante rivals so much about her green strategies, but yet she's dumping all her infrastructure in our backyard. I'm not too pleased about that. And our cancer rates they are now 1.77 cases per household on average. That is highly unacceptable. And our people are dropping like flies left and right. It's beyond GNR. There's a lot more to this place. And it's been going on for too long. And everyone knew about this, provincial governments and federal governments, but now it's coming to the surface. Your policies are weak. Your policies need to be strengthened. Your policies need to reflect the human aspect of life and not just to give fines, because money is nothing to some corporations. What we need to concentrate and consider is all the constituents along the Ottawa Valley, downstream, going into the St. Lawrence as well. I share with Mr. Clark here his concerns of his salmon population in BC. They take First Nations life for granted that once we kill them all off, we can take the land. And I do sympathize with Mr. Clark that where First Nations are concerned, they have to be listened to because we have the key in First Nations knowledge that can help you in your policies and to manage in the future. However, we have to manage the sources of the contamination, which is and has to be including the City of Montreal and all surrounding municipalities and governments who actually enable these companies to come here and dump this on us, because I consider this nothing but environmental racism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. That's a helpful overview. And you mentioned, I think you were referring to Mr. Charlie, who testified earlier about the situation in the Cowichan watershed. And Mr. Charlie, I wanted to give you a moment to speak about your observations there. I know that in the Cowichan watershed, there have been numerous and ongoing efforts over the years, both at the grassroots level and at the government level, to try to address some of these water issues. Do you feel like the efforts to date haven't gone far enough? And do you feel that until this issue of the diversion of water by the mill in Crofton is addressed in a substantive way, that we won't see the kind of progress that we need to?
Very briefly, please, Mr. Charlie. We have about 30 seconds. We're having some technical... Oh, I believe you're on mute. You're Mr. Charlie. You're on mute. There we go. That should be good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I spoke to Laurel Collins, Member of Parliament for Victoria, and I told her my concern about the Crofton Mill overusing the resources, that being water, and I had just heard that they were dumping some of the waste, or it was leaking into the water, and that is causing a lot of damage, not just to the ocean but to the river too. I feel like that the government needs to come down and listen to the elders. These elders have a way of connecting to the land and knowing what we need.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I think the government needs to come down and sit down and listen to the people that live by the water, because the water is life, and it's we're committing genocide against the land.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for a second round. I'd like to do a second round. We have the House Resources. I'd like to do a truncated second round like we did with the first panel, so like basically 4 minutes and 2 minutes. So we'll go now to Mr. Cram for 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. My questions will be for Mr. Anno from Fertilizer Canada. Mr. Anno, in your opening statement, you talked about technologies and practices that can reduce phosphorus runoff into our lakes and rivers. Could you expand a little bit on what these technologies and practices are?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a number of examples in terms of precision agricultural technologies, for example, that we do feature in our best practices. One example would be, for example, switching from broadcast fertilizer to banding, where you can basically insert bands of fertilizer within the actual crop itself within the soil by the root system in order to basically provide more of an efficient uptake of nutrients. There's also reduced overlap, which uses section control and onboard GPS to help track the actual tracking of where the machinery would take a pass through the crop to make sure there's less overlap. By reducing the amount of overlap, you have less of a pileup of nutrients, which would be less susceptible to runoff in the event of extreme rainfall. And by a similar extent, there's also variable rate equipment, which would control the rate at which the fertilizer is applied, using, once again, onboard sensors to determine where within the crop the nutrients are most required in order to ensure efficient application at the right rate of nutrient application. And once again, this does reduce the amount of excess nutrients that are within the field itself. So in the event of any extreme rainfall, there would be less runoff.
Also talked in your opening statement about the cost of initial implementation of some of these technologies. Can you give us an idea for an average farmer on an average farm, how much money are we talking here?
Sure. Well, in terms of equipment, I mean, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it would be in the high hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of equipment that you're looking to invest in. We do know, for example, there is government support available on that end. The Agricultural Clean Technology Fund, for example, I believe does provide a level of support there. We do know, I think the cost share ratio in terms of that does require, I think, like a minimum $50,000 for participants to apply on that. We've definitely addressed this in terms of maybe potentially smaller farmers who benefit for the cost savings that would accrue for best practices associated with this machinery. That might be a bit high of a buy-in. So we've always kind of discussed potentially scaling down the equipment so it's more affordable to a wider variety of farms. And to that effect, I know AFC studied that, I believe, with ISED in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And I think the outcomes of that report are still forthcoming, but that would be one approach I think that would help support.
About 3 years ago, the government released its report titled Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy. And in it, it outlined the government's plan to reduce fertilizer emissions by 30% below 2020 levels. And I would think that must include a significant reduction in fertilizer applications to reduce emissions by 30%. Can you give us an idea of by how much would fertilizer applications have to be reduced in order to reduce emissions by 30%?
Well, we know that the government has put the position forth that it's not an application reduction target, just an emission reduction target. I know, for example, Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau did show up at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture's AGM this past winter to announce that. But we did see language around use reduction mentioned in the budget. So it's something that we do put a bit of a note of concern on. We do believe that reductions are achievable in terms of implementing forward practices to ensure that the right rate does require less emission reduction. We hopefully encourage government to focus on not use of reduction caps being put on fertilizer. We did have a 4-hour agri-economics study.
Well, we have to move on to Ms. Taylor-Roy for 4 minutes, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to actually continue the line of questioning with Mr. Arnaud. I was very interested to hear the 4R program. We've heard about it many times before, and I think it's a fantastic program for our farmers to be using, and I know many have adopted, as you have said. You mentioned the target you have. I think it was 15 million acres by 2025. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And what percentage of the total farmland does that represent, then, of farmers that could possibly adopt the 4R program?
Off the top of my head, I actually don't have that information, unfortunately. But it's it's something, and just to be specific as well, the 15 million would include acres under both our certification and our designation programming. So the certification having that component largely run within Ontario, that does have that auditing component.
Be able to submit that to the committee. I appreciate it to know what percentage of farmers are actually have participated in the program and what the goal is in terms of potential, because I think it is a very beneficial program for agriculture. And I know they're doing a lot. I understand we are looking at the offsets you have talked about as well, which I think would be beneficial. When you talk about the cost, the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the equipment that's needed for the targeted fertilizer application, again, could you put that in context? Because I find the numbers, when they're just out there, hard to understand. Compared to, for example, the other capital costs on some of these large farms, or the overall expenses in the farms. If you could submit something that shows what the cost of doing this is relative, especially on an amortized basis over time, what the cost is relative to other costs that these large farms are incurring, that would also be helpful.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that the Agri Clean Tech Fund has already has funding for this.
Yeah, for support for precision agricultural technology. That's one of the sources of support available.
Do you feel this funding is sufficient? Do you know what the uptake has been on this?
I don't know what the uptake has been on the program off the top of my head, unfortunately. I don't. I know it's been definitely leveled as a bit of a key resource for a lot of farms. In my previous role, I worked at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and it was the initial investment cost for smaller farmers was somewhat of a concern in terms of the cost share.
The $50,000 you're talking about?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And the nitrous oxide that is emitted from these fertilizers, I understand that it's multiples more destructive or detrimental to our environment than carbon dioxide, for example. When you talk about the difference between emissions and the actual amount used, how can emissions be reduced without the amount of fertilizer being reduced? Because I seem to have some question in terms of the application or the alternatives to some of the fertilizers, the nitrous oxide fertilizers nitrogen fertilizers that are being used right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's specific to the 4R program that I was talking about, which is the right source of fertilizer applied at the right rate in the right place at the right time. For example, you can take a similar quantity of fertilizer and apply it, after a rainfall, and you would likely have reduced emissions compared to then whether you applied it before the rainfall. Increased rainfall, for example, causes volatilization, which increases, of course, emissions from fertilizer. The goal with the application method there is to make sure that it's it's subject to local environmental conditions as well as regional soil conditions too, to account for those variabilities.
Merci beaucoup. Il reste plus de temps là.
Thank you. Time is up. On to Mr. Garon for 2 minutes. Thank you. Grand Chief, you talked about certain documents earlier. I'd like to remind you that you can give them to the committee in the next days and weeks. That said, the Liberal MP said that you were off topic. I don't think that it is off topic at the Environmental Committee to talk about point of order, Mr. Chair. Well, I still want to clarify that my colleagues' questions are not pertinent to the study, but the issue itself is. All right. Thank you to the member for amending what she said. I think that it is very relevant to talk about health. And you were talking about the Mohawk Nation and the entire region. You said that you are trying to fix the environmental issue with the federal government, and it has been difficult. In the minutes that are left, I would like you to talk directly to the ministers with regards to upcoming steps.
1 minute, please, which should
Excuse
be
me?
sufficient, I think, but 1 minute, yeah.
Okay. Firstly, I'd just like to say that I appreciate everybody sitting here and listening to the issues from Ganasadaga and the surrounding municipalities. The main thing I'd like to get across is that the federal government has a fiduciary duty to the benefit and health and welfare of all First Nations, including Ganasadaga. And I've also been told by former Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Mark Miller, and Minister Haju, that Ganasadaga is a priority. Well, we haven't been treated like a priority at all. We've met with them a few times. I mean, we've been getting more attention by the province with Minister Lafreniere than we have with the federal government, who is supposed to be taking care of our welfare and our health and our lands and helping us with that. But they haven't been. They've been diverting that and keeping away from it and trying to have us fix our own issues, while our issue lies within the federal government and the provincial government.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Bachrach, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I just get clarity on when we're adjourning?
2 minutes for you, 4 minutes for Mr. Leslie, 4 minutes for Mr. Ali.
I think we're supposed to be adjourned at 1:30.
The signal I got was that the committee didn't mind doing a full second round. It is smaller, yeah.
So, Mr.
It's fine
Chair,
if you have to go. That's fine. It's fine. Nobody's being kept here against their will, and we're not.
I think that this testimony has been really important and very interesting. I would like to change topics very briefly at the end of our meeting to move the motion that I put on notice at our last meeting, that given the importance of freshwater ecosystem services to the prosperity, sustainability, and resilience of British Columbian communities, and given the increasingly severe impacts of climate change, including drought, wildfires, and floods, the committee urged the federal government to match the government of British Columbia's, that the committee urged the federal government to work with the government of British Columbia to establish a $1 billion watershed security fund, and that the committee report this to the House.
Debate this now. Yeah.
I think we heard some very strong testimony from the BC Wildlife Federation, and it's an issue on which I think we find common cause around this table, and I would hope that we wouldn't have to debate it for 3 or 4 days, that we could move to a vote on it and send a message.
Okay, so I have Mr. Van Couverden. I think Mr. Van Couverden, did you have? Yeah.
I think we have an amendment for this, which I'm looking for. Oh, you guys are frustrated that we're doing a motion? Funny. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Van Couverden has an amendment to Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the indulgence of our colleagues opposite who routinely run motions in the middle of these studies. The only amendment would just be that at the end, as soon as possible, as Mr. Bachrach said, that the government provide a written response to this committee as soon as possible.
Okay. Do we want to? Do we want to? I'm going to. Anyway, do we want to vote on this resolution, Madame Posey?
Personally, I don't want to go to a vote today, and I would move to adjourn the meeting. So you move to adjourn the meeting? Do we have to look at the motion beforehand, before adjourning? We have to vote on the motion of adjournment of Ms. Posey.
Clarification, but we're not debate.
Okay, my clarification to Madame Posey, I think what she was trying to do was to move the debate on this motion to a future meeting.
No, she says she wants to adjourn.
You want to kill the debate and kill the motion?
She wants to adjourn. She wants to adjourn. She wants to adjourn.
I don't want to not debate the motion. I'm asking if it can be debated during another meeting. And then it will have to be retabled. So now you just want to adjourn, no debate. Can we move to a vote with raised hands? Who would like to adjourn?
So I think we're going.
Everyone wants to adjourn?
Adjourn. I want to thank the witnesses for an interesting discussion, and we'll see you all in question period, the members.
The meeting.